The red bow on top of the BMW gleamed under my son's Christmas lights like a taunt, like a slap across the face wrapped in silk ribbon. I stood behind my kitchen window, watching Kyle hand Victoria Shaw the keys to her brand new $60,000 Christmas gift. My son's face was beaming with pride, the same expression he used to have when he brought home straight A's, when he graduated from college, when he married Jessica. "Merry Christmas, Mom Vicky," he called out, his voice carrying through the cold Virginia air. Mom Vicky. I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. This woman had been in our family for exactly 8 months, and she was already Mom Vicky. Meanwhile I, the woman who carried Kyle for 9 months, who nursed him through chickenpox and heartbreaks and that awful car accident when he was 17, I was just Mom. Jessica squealed and clapped like they had just cured cancer instead of buying a luxury car for a woman who'd managed to worm her way into our family faster than anyone I'd ever seen. "You want to know what my loving son got his actual mother for Christmas? Let me show you." I picked up the pink plastic piggy bank from the counter and shook it. 3 lonely dollar bills rustled inside like dead leaves. $3. After 35 years of raising him. After every sacrifice I'd made. After every penny I'd spent on his college education, his wedding, his down payment on that house he and Jessica were so proud of. $3. "It's symbolic, Mom," Kyle had explained earlier, using that patronizing tone he'd perfected since marrying Jessica. "You're always saving money, so we thought this would be perfect. A little reminder to keep being thrifty." Perfect. That's exactly what I'd called it when I smiled sweetly and thanked him for such a thoughtful gift. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We smile. We pretend our hearts aren't breaking while our children hand us scraps and call it love. I watched Jessica link arms with Victoria, both of them admiring the leather interior like schoolgirls ogling a celebrity. Victoria laughed that tinkling laugh of hers, the one that had charmed Kyle from day one, and ran her manicured fingers along the dashboard. Victoria Shaw had swooped into our family after my dear husband Tom passed away 2 years ago. She'd appeared at Jessica's birthday party in April, introduced as a friend of a friend, and somehow managed to make herself indispensable within weeks. She was always there, every family gathering, every Sunday dinner, every holiday. With her perfectly styled silver hair and designer clothes, Victoria looked like the kind of wealthy widow you'd see in a magazine advertisement for luxury retirement communities. Elegant, refined, harmless. And now she was Mom Vicky, while I, the woman who actually birthed Kyle, had apparently been demoted to someone worth exactly $3. The December wind rattled my kitchen window as I set the piggy bank on the counter next to the Christmas cards I'd never gotten around to sending. Cards that would have cost more than my entire gift. The irony wasn't lost on me, though I doubt Kyle would appreciate it, even if I explained it to him in small words. I'd spent the entire morning cooking their Christmas dinner. 6 hours on my feet in this kitchen, preparing honey-glazed ham, homemade rolls, green bean casserole from scratch. Not that canned soup nonsense. And that ridiculous trifle Jessica insisted on every year, even though nobody but her actually liked it. My feet ached, my back screamed, my hands were raw from washing dishes. But hey, at least I got $3 out of the deal. The front door opened and I heard Jessica's voice carrying through the house. "We're heading out to show Mom Vicky her new car around town. Be back in a couple hours." "Not would you like to come, Renee? Not want to join us?" Just an announcement that they were leaving, taking their precious Mom Vicky on a victory lap while the woman who'd provided their Christmas feast stood alone in her kitchen holding a children's toy. "Thanks for dinner, Mom," Kyle called out. "We'll see you next week." Next week? When they needed something, no doubt. Someone to babysit the grandkids. Someone to cook another meal. Someone to be useful. My jaw tightened as I listened to their car doors slam, one after another, followed by the distinctive purr of a $60,000 engine pulling out of my driveway. The house fell silent. Just me, the hum of the dishwasher, and the ticking of the grandfather clock Tom had loved so much. I looked around my empty kitchen, at the mountain of dishes I'd volunteered to clean up, at the leftover food that would feed me for a week because God knows they wouldn't take any home. That's when I noticed it. Victoria's purse, a black leather Kate Spade bag, sitting right there on my counter, forgotten in her excitement over her shiny new toy. She'd left it right next to my $3 piggy bank, and somehow that felt like the universe delivering a message. I picked up the purse, feeling its expensive weight in my hands. Inside, I could see her wallet, thick with credit cards and cash, her phone in a rhinestone case and a prescription bottle. How careless of her to leave behind something so important. How very careless indeed. A slow smile spread across my face as I carried Victoria's purse to my bedroom. After all, I was just being helpful, making sure nothing was missing before I returned it. That's what good mothers do. Victoria's wallet was a treasure trove of information. And I do mean treasure. As I carefully inventoried the contents on my bedroom dresser, Tom's old reading chair positioned perfectly by the window for light, I couldn't help but marvel at how much you can learn about a person from their purse. Cash. Nearly $400. Not unusual for some people, but Victoria had always presented herself as someone getting by on a fixed income. Credit cards from every major bank, plus store cards for Nordstrom, Saks, and Tiffany. Not exactly the portfolio of someone struggling to make ends meet, but it was the folded papers tucked behind her driver's license that made my eyebrows shoot up. Bank statements. 3 of them, printed just last week. Our dear Victoria wasn't just well off. She was loaded. The kind of loaded that makes a $60,000 BMW look like pocket change. Her checking account balance alone had more zeros than I'd seen since Tom's life insurance payout. I sat back in Tom's old recliner, the one Kyle had tried to convince me to throw away because it didn't match Jessica's decorating vision, and stared at those numbers. If Victoria Shaw was this wealthy, why was she letting my son spend $60,000 on a car for her? Why was she pretending to be a lonely widow looking for family when she clearly didn't need financial help from anyone? Her phone buzzed constantly, lighting up with text notifications I couldn't help but notice. Deposit confirmed $15,000 from Sunset Investments. Meeting confirmed for Thursday. Bring the Carter file. Carter, that would be us. The Carter family. My stomach tightened as I picked up the phone, studying the screen. More messages kept coming. Property appraisal completed. Value exceeds projections. POA documents ready for filing. I didn't know what POA meant. Not yet, but something cold was crawling up my spine. The prescription bottle caught my attention next. Anxiety medication, prescribed just 2 months ago, right around the time Victoria had started getting more involved in our family's affairs. She'd been so helpful lately, offering to drive me to doctor's appointments, volunteering to review my insurance policies, asking detailed questions about Tom's pension. Just want to make sure you're taken care of, honey, she'd say with that sweet smile. But now I was starting to wonder exactly who was being taken care of. I opened her photo gallery, telling myself I was still just being thorough, making sure nothing important was missing, and what I found made my blood run cold. Photos of our family gatherings. Victoria at Kyle and Jessica's anniversary dinner. Victoria at their Labor Day barbecue. Victoria at Jessica's birthday party where she'd first appeared. In every single photo, she was positioned between Kyle and Jessica, like she belonged there, like she was more family than I was. But it was the older photos, the ones buried deep in her camera roll, that made my hands start shaking. Pictures of documents, screenshots of bank statements, photos of the inside of my house, my bedroom, my home office, areas where a guest had no business being, let alone photographing. The timestamps showed she'd been documenting things for months, long before her relationship with our family had become so cozy. And then I found it. A photo of Tom's death certificate, another of our marriage license, screenshots of property records showing the value of our house, and a photo that made my stomach drop straight through the floor, my Social Security card, the one I kept locked in my jewelry box upstairs, the one nobody should have access to, the one that was the key to my entire financial identity. Victoria Shaw wasn't a lonely widow looking for family connection. She was conducting surveillance. The question was, why? And more importantly, what was she planning to do with all this information? The house phone rang, jarring me from my investigation. Mrs. Carter, this is Officer Patterson with the State Police. I'm calling about a report we received regarding a missing person. A Victoria Shaw? My heart skipped, but I kept my voice steady. 40 years as an ER nurse had taught me how to stay calm in a crisis. Victoria Shaw? I'm sorry, officer, but what's this about? Our records show she was last seen at your address earlier today. Her son filed the report when she didn't return home and wasn't answering her phone. I nearly dropped the phone. Her son. Victoria had told everyone, that she was alone in the world. A widow with no family, no children, no one to spend the holidays with, which was precisely why Kyle and Jessica had taken her in like a stray cat. But apparently, she had a son who cared enough to call the police when she went missing for a few hours. "Well," I said carefully, "we did have Christmas dinner today, but I believe she left with my son and daughter-in-law. They were going for a drive in her new car." "New car?" "A BMW Christmas gift from my son." I let that sink in, curious about the officer's reaction. "Perhaps you should contact them directly, Kyle and Jessica Carter." After I hung up, I looked at Victoria's phone again. 23 missed calls from someone named Daniel Shaw. Text messages getting increasingly frantic. "Mom, where are you? The police are looking for you. Please call me back." I sat there in the growing darkness of my living room, holding the phone of a woman who'd been lying to my family for months. Victoria had a son who loved her enough to call the police when she didn't answer her phone. A son who was clearly devoted, clearly worried, clearly connected to his mother. Meanwhile, my own son had driven off without a backward glance, leaving me alone with dirty dishes and a $3 piggy bank. The irony was delicious and infuriating. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee and my old laptop, searching for everything I could find about Daniel Shaw. It took me exactly 15 minutes to find him on social media, and what I discovered made everything click into place like the final piece of a jigsaw puzzle. Daniel Shaw wasn't just Victoria's son. He was a successful attorney in Seattle, specializing in, wait for it, elder law and estate planning. His professional website showed a handsome man in his late 30s with his mother's sharp eyes and calculating smile. His bio listed his specialties: estate planning, asset protection, and, my heart nearly stopped, elder fraud prosecution. This man had built his entire career on catching people who scam elderly victims. And his mother was in Virginia, running what looked like the exact same con he spent his professional life fighting. I kept digging. Daniel's Facebook page was full of photos with Victoria. Recent photos, family dinners, birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings. He called her the best mom in the world in a post from just last month. This wasn't a distant, estranged relationship. This was a devoted son who spoke to his mother regularly, spent holidays with her, and clearly adored her. So why was Victoria in Virginia pretending to be alone? Why was she inserting herself into our family when she clearly had family of her own? And here was the biggest irony of all, the twist that made me laugh out loud in my empty kitchen at 3 a.m. Victoria Shaw's own son had built his career prosecuting exactly the kind of crime his mother appeared to be committing. I printed articles about Daniel Shaw, his successful cases, his published papers on identifying elder fraud, his speeches at legal conferences about protecting seniors from family members and trusted friends who exploit their trust. Every word he'd written seemed to describe his own mother. As the sun started to rise over Virginia, painting my kitchen in shades of gold and pink, I set down my coffee cup and looked at the evidence spread across my table. Victoria Shaw wasn't who she pretended to be. She had money, she had family, she had a son who loved her. But she also had photos of my personal documents, access to my house, and a Carter file that apparently needed to be brought to Thursday's meeting. I didn't know the full scope of her plan yet, but I knew enough. This woman had spent months positioning herself in my family, gathering information, and building trust. All while my own son treated her like royalty, and me like an afterthought. I picked up the $3 piggy bank and set it next to my laptop screen, where Daniel Shaw's professional photo stared back at me. "Victoria Shaw," I said to the empty kitchen, "you picked the wrong woman to mess with." I'd spent 40 years in emergency rooms, dealing with life and death decisions in split seconds. I'd seen every kind of human drama, every manipulation, every con. I'd learned to read people, to spot liars, to stay calm when everything was falling apart. Victoria looked at me and saw a helpless old widow, someone easily manipulated, someone who would smile and accept her $3 gifts while her house was stolen out from under her. She didn't see the woman who'd navigated hospital politics for 4 decades, the woman who'd raised a child alone while working double shifts, the woman who'd survived losing the love of her life and rebuilt herself from the ashes. She saw weakness. She was about to discover strength. I looked out my window at the neighborhood where I'd lived for 30 years, at the house Tom and I had built our entire life in, at the garden where I'd planted roses for his funeral. Victoria Shaw wanted to take this from me. She wanted to use my own son as a weapon against me. But what she didn't understand, what she couldn't possibly understand, was that she'd just handed me everything I needed to destroy her. I knew about her son now, about her wealth, about her surveillance, and she'd left her purse in my kitchen like a gift-wrapped confession. I smiled, gathering up my evidence and heading to the shower. I had work to do, calls to make, a trap to set. Victoria Shaw thought she was playing chess with a helpless old woman. She was about to learn that this old woman had been watching, learning, and planning. And unlike her, I actually knew the rules of the game. The next morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of January weather that seeps into your bones and makes you want to stay under the covers forever. But I had no time for rest. I was already on my second pot of coffee when the clock struck 7. My kitchen table transformed into a war room. Printed articles about Daniel Shaw were stacked in one pile, screenshots from Victoria's phone in another, and in the center, like evidence in a courtroom, sat the $3 piggy bank, my constant reminder of what was at stake. My first call was to Daniel Shaw's law office in Seattle. I used my sweetest grandmother voice when his secretary answered, the one I'd perfected over 40 years of dealing with difficult patients and even more difficult doctors. "Hello, dear. This is Renee Carter from Virginia. I'm calling about Daniel's mother, Victoria. There was a little incident yesterday, and I just wanted to make sure she's all right." "Oh, you must be the family friend she's been visiting." The secretary's voice brightened immediately. "Mr. Shaw was so worried yesterday when his mother didn't answer her phone. Is she okay?" Family friend. Interesting choice of words. "Yes, she's fine now. But I'm curious. How long has Victoria been staying in Virginia? Daniel must miss her terribly." "Oh, it's been several months now, since September, I think." The secretary paused, and I could hear papers rustling. "He calls her every single day. Such a devoted son. He was planning to visit for Christmas, actually, but Victoria insisted she wanted to spend the holidays with her new friends there." September. Victoria had been in Virginia since September. That meant she'd been planning whatever this was for 4 months. 4 months of research. 4 months of positioning. 4 months of worming her way into my family's trust. And she'd deliberately kept her devoted son away for Christmas so he wouldn't interfere with her operation. "Well, she's certainly become part of our family here," I said lightly. "My son even bought her a car yesterday. A BMW. The silence on the other end was deafening. "I'm sorry, did you say your son bought her a car?" "A beautiful BMW, $60,000. He's so generous with the people he cares about." "Mrs. Carter." The secretary's voice had changed. Confusion mixed with something else. Concern, maybe. "I think there might be some misunderstanding. Victoria has her own car, and her own money. She wouldn't need anyone to buy her anything. She's quite well off financially." "Oh my," I said, letting my voice quiver just slightly. "Well, perhaps I misunderstood. You know how it is with us older folks. We get confused so easily." After I hung up, I poured another cup of coffee and stared out at my winter garden. Victoria Shaw was wealthy. She had a devoted son who called her daily. She owned her own car. So why was she letting Kyle spend $60,000, money I was increasingly certain he didn't actually have, on another one? My second call was to the county clerk's office. "Yes, I'm trying to verify some property records for my house on Maple Street. There may have been an appraisal done recently that I didn't authorize." The clerk was helpful, surprisingly so. Within minutes, she'd pulled up the records. "Let me see here. Yes, ma'am, there was an appraisal completed on your property in October. October 15th, to be exact." My grip tightened on the phone. "And who authorized that appraisal?" "It was ordered by a Kyle Carter for estate planning purposes. He's listed as your power of attorney on the request form. He provided all the necessary documentation." The room tilted. Power of attorney. I had never granted Kyle power of attorney over anything. After Tom died, my lawyer Margaret had specifically asked if I wanted to set up those documents, and I'd declined. I wasn't ready to hand over control of my life to anyone, not even my own son. But apparently, someone had created paperwork claiming otherwise. "Thank you," I managed to say. "That's very helpful." I hung up and immediately called Margaret Patterson's office. She'd handled Tom's will and our estate planning for 20 years. If anyone had filed power of attorney documents in my name, she would have copies. Margaret, I need to see you. Today. It's urgent. Margaret's office was exactly as I remembered it. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and the faint smell of old books and expensive coffee. She'd been Tom's lawyer before she was mine, and she'd held my hand through the worst days of my life. Now she was staring at her computer screen with an expression that made my blood run cold. Renee, her voice was barely above a whisper. I've never prepared any power of attorney documents for you. You were very clear after Tom died that you wanted to maintain complete control of your affairs. Then how did Kyle get authorization to order an appraisal of my house? Margaret's fingers flew over the keyboard, her face growing paler with each click. Let me check something. More clicking, more silence. Then she looked up at me with eyes full of alarm. Renee, someone filed a power of attorney document with the county clerk 3 weeks ago. It's notarized and appears to grant Kyle Carter complete authority over your financial and property matters. She turned her monitor toward me. There on the screen was a legal document bearing my name and signature. It looked official, complete with a notary seal and witness signatures. The kind of document that would stand up in court, that would give Kyle the legal right to sell my house, drain my accounts, make decisions about my entire life. It was also a complete forgery. The signature looks like yours, Margaret said carefully, studying the screen. Whoever did this knew your handwriting. I leaned closer, examining every stroke, and there it was, the proof I needed. Look at the Y in Renee, I said, pointing. I always loop it twice. This only has one loop, and I never dot my I's with circles. I use plain dots. I traced my finger along several other inconsistencies. This is a very good forgery, Margaret, but it's not my signature. Margaret's expression hardened. Renee, if someone forged legal documents to gain control of your assets, this is fraud. Serious fraud. We need to call the police immediately. Not yet. Renee, Margaret, listen to me. I sat back in my chair, feeling calmer than I had any right to feel. If I report this now, they'll destroy evidence and claim it was all a misunderstanding. Kyle will say he was trying to help me. Victoria will disappear back to Seattle, and I'll never know the full scope of what they were planning. This is dangerous. If they have fake power of attorney documents, they could sell your house tomorrow, drain your accounts, anything. That's exactly what I think they're planning. I pulled out the screenshots I'd taken from Victoria's phone, the photos of my documents, the messages about the Carter file, the property appraisal notifications. But I want to catch them in the act. I want evidence so solid that no lawyer in the world can get them out of it. Margaret studied the screenshots, her frown deepening with each page. Victoria Shaw, she murmured. Why does that name sound familiar? Her son is Daniel Shaw, elder fraud attorney in Seattle. He's made quite a name for himself prosecuting exactly this kind of scam. Margaret's head snapped up. You're telling me this woman's son prosecutes elder fraud, and she's running an elder fraud scheme? Ironic, isn't it? For a long moment, Margaret just stared at me. Then slowly she started to smile. Renee Carter, what exactly are you planning? I smiled back. I need you to help me change my will. Effective immediately. I want to leave everything to charity. Every penny, every piece of property, every asset I own. Make it ironclad. No loopholes, no contests, no way for Kyle or anyone else to inherit so much as $1. You're cutting your son out of your will? I'm protecting my assets while I figure out how deep this goes. I stood up, gathering my things. And I'm going to need some documents of my own. Fake bank statements showing I'm worth considerably more than I actually am. Investment proposals with enough financial jargon to sound legitimate. Can you help me with that? Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying me with new respect. You know, Renee, when you first walked in here 2 years ago after Tom's funeral, I thought you were a sweet, grieving widow who needed protecting. And now? Now I think Victoria Shaw made the biggest mistake of her life when she decided to target you. The confrontation came 3 days later. Kyle and Jessica arrived at my house looking like they'd dressed for a funeral. Kyle in his serious business suit, Jessica in what I'd privately come to think of as her handling difficult clients outfit. They sat across from me at my kitchen table like a tribunal about to deliver a verdict. Mom, Kyle began, his voice carefully controlled. Victoria is very upset. She feels like you violated her privacy when you went through her purse. I raised an eyebrow. Violated her privacy by keeping her purse safe? I'm afraid I don't understand, sweetheart. She thinks you went through her things. Well, of course I did. I kept my voice perfectly innocent. What if something had fallen out? What if she'd had medication that needed refrigeration? I was being responsible. Jessica leaned forward, her wedding ring catching the light as she touched it nervously. Renee, Victoria feels uncomfortable about some of the questions you asked last night. About her son, about her finances. I was making conversation, dear. I thought it was wonderful that she has family who care about her. Kyle's jaw tightened. The thing is, Mom, Victoria's been through a lot. Her relationship with her son is complicated. She doesn't like to talk about it. Complicated. That wasn't how Daniel's secretary had described their daily phone calls and family dinners. I see, I said slowly. And the police call? Was that complicated too? They exchanged glances, the kind married couples share when they're trying to keep their stories straight. Jessica spoke carefully. Victoria explained that her son has some control issues. He gets anxious when he doesn't know where she is. It's actually part of why she needed to get away from Seattle. Control issues. I almost laughed at the audacity. They were rewriting reality in real time, turning a concerned, loving son into a controlling monster to explain away yesterday's inconvenient phone call. How awful for her, I said sympathetically. It must be so hard to have family who care too much. Kyle missed the sarcasm entirely. Exactly. That's why what you did was so hurtful. She trusted us with her privacy, and then you started interrogating her about her personal life. Kyle, I asked where her son lived. That's hardly an interrogation. Mom, the point is, he stopped, took a breath, started again. The point is, Victoria is family now. She's been like a mother to us, especially after Dad died. She's been there for us in ways that... He stopped himself, but the damage was done. In ways that what, Kyle? My voice was quiet now, dangerous. In ways that I haven't been? Jessica jumped in quickly. That's not what he meant. No, I think it's exactly what he meant. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Tom and I had planted together 30 years ago. Victoria has been like a mother to you, the kind of mother who deserves a $60,000 BMW, unlike your actual mother, who apparently deserves $3 in a plastic piggy bank. The silence was arctic. Kyle's face flushed red. That gift was symbolic, Mom. You know that. Yes, you've explained the symbolism. I'm a penny-pinching old woman who should be grateful for scraps. I turned back to face them. Tell me something, Kyle. How exactly did you afford Victoria's car? What do you mean? I mean, $60,000 is a lot of money, even for someone with your new promotion. I watched Jessica's hand go to her wedding ring again. Her tell, I'd noticed, for when she was lying. What is your new title again? Regional Sales Manager. Same company. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. What does this have to do with anything? It's interesting, that's all. Because I ran into your old boss, Jim Henderson, at the grocery store last week. He mentioned they'd had to let several people go recently. Budget cuts. I paused. He was worried about you, Kyle. Said your numbers had been down for months. Kyle went very still. Jim doesn't know about internal promotions, he said finally. No, I suppose he wouldn't, especially if they didn't actually happen. The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock. Finally, Jessica spoke up. Renee, I think we should go. This conversation isn't productive. You're probably right. I walked them to the door, then paused with my hand on the knob. But before you leave, Kyle, there's something I need to ask you about. What? The power of attorney documents that were filed with the county clerk 3 weeks ago. The ones that give you complete control over my finances and property. I watched his face carefully. The ones with my forged signature. Kyle went white, not the flush of someone caught in a lie, the pallor of someone genuinely shocked. Mom, his voice cracked. I don't know anything about any power of attorney documents. That wasn't part of the plan. What plan, Kyle? For a long moment, he just stared at me. Jessica was frozen beside him, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. And then, like a dam breaking, everything came pouring out. They sat back down at my kitchen table, and for the next hour, my son told me the truth. Jessica had lost her job 6 months ago. Not downsized, the company had gone bankrupt, leaving her with nothing. No severance, no references, no prospects. Kyle hadn't gotten a promotion. He'd been written up twice for poor performance and was on the verge of being fired. They were behind on their mortgage, behind on their car payments, behind on everything. The college funds they'd started for Emma and Jake? Gone. Cashed out months ago just to keep the lights on. Jessica was talking about divorce lawyers, Kyle said, his voice barely above a whisper. The kids were asking why we couldn't afford their school activities anymore, and I was working 70-hour weeks just to stay afloat. And Victoria? Kyle laughed bitterly. Victoria was a miracle, or so I thought. She showed up right when everything was falling apart, and she was so understanding, so helpful. She said she knew people, important people with money, people who could help us restructure our debts, get back on our feet. And all you had to do was show her we were serious. Kyle couldn't meet my eyes. She said her investment group required a demonstration of good faith from potential clients, something to prove we could handle significant financial decisions. The BMW. She said once we showed that level of commitment, her associates would review our situation, help us consolidate our debts, set up new investment portfolios, maybe even help us qualify for better mortgage terms. For a fee, I assume? Well, yes, but she said the returns would more than offset the costs. Kyle finally looked up at me, and I saw the little boy he'd once been, scared, ashamed, desperate for someone to tell him everything would be okay. Mom, I was drowning. When Victoria offered a solution, I grabbed it like a life preserver. And you never thought to ask me for help? The question hung in the air between us. Because you sacrificed your whole life for me, Kyle whispered. You and Dad worked extra shifts to buy me that bicycle when I was 12. You cashed in your retirement to pay for my wedding. You've given me everything, Mom, and I couldn't, his voice broke. I couldn't look you in the eye and tell you I'd failed, that everything you'd worked for, everything you'd given me, wasn't enough to stop me from destroying my family. Tears were streaming down his face now. Real tears, not the crocodile ones I'd learned to spot in 40 years of nursing. Jessica was crying too, her makeup running in dark streaks down her cheeks. And despite everything, despite the $3 piggy bank and the forged documents and the months of being treated like an afterthought, my heart broke for them. Because Kyle wasn't a villain. He was a desperate man who'd been targeted by a predator specifically because of his desperation. Kyle, I said gently, Victoria Shaw is not helping anyone. She's running a con, and you and Jessica are both the bait and the backup plan. What do you mean? I think Victoria's original plan was to manipulate me directly into signing over my assets, but when I proved harder to crack than she expected, she shifted to using you as leverage. I reached across the table and took his hand. Get you so deep in debt that I'd have no choice but to help, then present her investment group as the only solution that could save everyone. Kyle stared at me, horror dawning in his eyes. But the power of attorney was Victoria's insurance policy. If all else failed, she'd have the legal authority to take everything anyway, using you as the unwitting face of the operation. I squeezed his hand. You were never her partner, Kyle. You were her puppet. We sat in silence for a long time after that. The grandfather clock ticked. The winter sun crept across the kitchen floor. And slowly, the three of us began to plan. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally, pulling out the folder Margaret had helped me prepare. Kyle, you're going to call Victoria and tell her I've agreed to her investment proposal. Say I was resistant at first, but after seeing how successful and generous she's been, I've decided to trust her judgment. But won't she be suspicious if you suddenly change your mind? Not if you sell it right. Victoria expects elderly people to be confused and changeable. She'll chalk it up to typical senior behavior and congratulate herself on her patience paying off. I spread the fake documents across the table, bank statements showing I was worth nearly $2 million, twice my actual worth. When Victoria sees these numbers, her greed is going to override her caution. Jessica was studying the papers with something like awe. Renee, these investment terms are incredibly sophisticated. How did you know what to include? I called Daniel Shaw's law office and told his secretary I was thinking about hiring him to review some investment proposals for potential fraud indicators. I smiled. She was very helpful in explaining what red flags to look for. Turns out Victoria's own son has published several articles about exactly the kind of scam she's running. Kyle shook his head slowly. Mom, this is insane. You're setting a trap for a professional con artist using information you got from her own son? Ironic, isn't it? It's genius. Jessica looked at me with new eyes. I had no idea you were capable of something like this. Nobody ever does, dear. That's the advantage of being a 70-year-old woman. Everyone assumes you're helpless. I gathered up the documents. Now, can you both play your parts? Because if you can't, you might end up facing criminal charges as Victoria's accomplices. They exchanged glances. We can do it, Kyle said quietly. Whatever it takes, Mom. We owe you that much. You don't owe me anything, sweetheart. You're my son. This is what mothers do. We protect our families, even when they make mistakes. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app I'd downloaded that morning. Now let's go over exactly what you're going to say to Victoria, because by the time we're finished with her, she's going to wish she'd never heard the name Carter. Friday arrived cold and sharp, the kind of winter day that felt like the world was holding its breath. Victoria Shaw's house was exactly what you'd expect from a woman playing the role of wealthy widow, a beautiful colonial in one of Richmond's nicer suburbs, with manicured hedges and a wreath on the door that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Kyle parked in the circular driveway, and for a moment the three of us just sat there in silence. You ready? I asked. Kyle's hands were trembling on the steering wheel. What if she figures it out? What if she sees through us? She won't. I patted his arm. Victoria has spent months building this con. She's emotionally invested in it succeeding. When people are that close to a big payoff, they ignore warning signs that would normally make them cautious. Your mother's right, Jessica said from the back seat. I've seen it in my clients. People who want something badly enough will convince themselves of almost anything. I checked my phone one last time. The recording app was running, the battery was full, and I had Margaret Patterson on speed dial in case things went sideways. Let's go catch ourselves a con artist. Victoria answered the door in full performance mode. She'd transformed her living room into a makeshift conference room with presentation materials spread across every surface. Charts showing projected returns, glossy brochures for investment opportunities, a leather portfolio that probably contained nothing but blank paper and broken promises. She was dressed for success, a silk blouse and cream, tasteful gold jewelry, her silver hair styled to perfection. She looked like the kind of financial advisor you'd see in a commercial, trustworthy and competent and completely full of lies. Renee, Kyle, Jessica. She embraced each of us like long-lost family. I'm so thrilled you've decided to move forward with this opportunity. Please come in, sit down. Can I get anyone coffee? Tea? Coffee would be lovely, dear, I said, settling into an uncomfortable modern chair that was all style and no substance, much like Victoria herself. As she bustled off to the kitchen, I took the opportunity to study the room. Everything was staged to impress. Expensive art on the walls, fresh flowers on the coffee table, a fire crackling in the fireplace. But there were tells if you knew where to look. The art was prints, not originals. The flowers were silk, and the investment materials spread across the table had the generic quality of templates downloaded from the internet. Victoria returned with a silver tray and began pouring coffee like a gracious hostess. Now, she said, settling into the chair across from me, I have to apologize that my associates couldn't be here today. They were called away on an emergency with another client. You know how it is with high-stakes financial matters. Sometimes situations require immediate attention. Of course, I said sweetly. But you can answer our questions, I'm sure. Absolutely. I've worked closely with this team for years. I know their strategies inside and out. I pulled out the fake bank statements Margaret had helped me create and spread them across her coffee table. Well then, let me show you what we're working with. Victoria picked up the documents, and I watched her eyes widen as she scanned the numbers. Her composure slipped for just a fraction of a second, a slight catch in her breath, a subtle tightening of her fingers on the paper. Renee? She looked up at me, and I could practically see the dollar signs replacing her pupils. These numbers are substantially more than we initially discussed. Yes. Well, I had my accountant do a comprehensive asset evaluation after our conversation last week. Turns out Tom was even more financially savvy than I realized. I shrugged modestly. $2 million, give or take. I had no idea we'd done so well. Victoria was practically vibrating with greed now. She set down the documents with careful reverence, like they were sacred texts. $2 million, she repeated. Well, this changes things considerably. With assets of this magnitude, we definitely want to structure the investment differently. How so? Much more aggressive growth strategies, higher return potentials. She leaned forward conspiratorially. And probably some offshore components to minimize tax liability. Offshore? I widened my eyes innocently. Is that legal? Completely legal when structured properly. My associates specialize in international investment vehicles that take advantage of favorable tax treaties. The Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. There are so many options for someone in your position. Kyle shifted uncomfortably beside me. Victoria had just proposed money laundering on top of fraud, and we had it all on tape. That sounds wonderful, I said. But I'm curious about something, Victoria. Of course, dear. Ask me anything. How exactly did you get into this line of work? You mentioned having experience with high-level financial strategies, but you've never really told us about your background. For the first time since we'd arrived, something flickered behind Victoria's perfect smile. Uncertainty, maybe. Or wariness. Well, I've worked with several investment groups over the years. I have a talent for identifying clients who would benefit from specialized services. And your son Daniel, does he work in finance as well? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victoria went very still, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. My son doesn't work in this field. No? I tilted my head, playing confused. That's interesting, because when I mentioned your name to my attorney, she said she'd heard of a Daniel Shaw who's made quite a name for himself in financial law. There are many Daniel Shaws in the world. True, but not many who specialize in prosecuting elder fraud. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. Victoria set down her coffee cup with exaggerated care. I'm not sure what you're implying, Renee. I'm not implying anything, dear. I'm stating facts. I pulled out my phone and laid it on the table between us. Your son Daniel Shaw is an elder fraud attorney in Seattle. He's built his career on prosecuting people who do exactly what you've been doing to my family for the past 8 months. Victoria's mask cracked. Just for a second, but it was enough. I think there's been some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I stood up, and Kyle and Jessica stood with me. I know about the fake power of attorney documents you filed with the county clerk. I know about the unauthorized property appraisal. I know about the surveillance photos you took of my personal documents, my social security card, my marriage license, my husband's death certificate. Victoria rose slowly, her face cycling through emotions, surprise, fear, calculation, before settling on cold fury. You went through my purse. You left it in my kitchen, right next to the $3 piggy bank your little scheme convinced my son to give me. I smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. Careless, Victoria. Very careless. Kyle. Victoria turned to my son, switching tactics instantly. Kyle, your mother is confused. She's making accusations she doesn't understand. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I was worried about. Save it. Kyle's voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. I know about the second mortgage you convinced me to take out. I know the investment group doesn't exist. And I know you've been playing my family since the day you walked into our lives. Victoria's eyes darted between us, calculating her options. For a moment, I thought she might try to run. Instead, she laughed. It wasn't the tinkling, charming laugh she'd used to seduce my family. This was something darker, bitter, real. Well, she said, sinking back into her chair, I suppose this is the part where you threaten to call the police. Oh, I'm definitely calling the police. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording app, making sure she saw me do it. But first, I think you owe us an explanation. Victoria Shaw sat in her expensive chair, surrounded by her fake investment materials and her silk flowers, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked like a real person instead of a performance. You want to know why? She shook her head slowly. You really want to know? I think you owe us that much. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, stripped of the honey sweetness, raw and tired. 15 years ago, I was you, Renee. Excuse me? A widow, trusting, desperate for connection after losing my husband. She stared at the fire, her profile sharp against the flickering light. I met a man at a grief support group. Charming, successful. He said all the right things, made all the right promises. I gave him access to my accounts, my investments, everything I had. What happened? He took it all. Every penny my husband had left me. 40 years of savings, gone in 6 months. Victoria's jaw tightened. And you know what the justice system did? Nothing. They said there wasn't enough evidence. He'd been careful, covered his tracks. Last I heard, he was running the same con in Florida on some other poor widow. Jessica spoke softly. That's terrible, Victoria, but it doesn't justify— Justify? Victoria laughed bitterly. I'm not looking for justification. You asked why, and I'm telling you. I spent 2 years after that trying to rebuild my life the honest way. Working minimum wage jobs at 60 years old, losing my house, filing for bankruptcy. She looked directly at me. And one day I woke up and realized the world doesn't reward good people. It eats them alive. So you became the predator instead of the prey. I decided that if the world was a jungle, I'd rather be the wolf than the sheep. Victoria shrugged. The people I target, they have money, more than they need, more than they even know what to do with. I'm not taking food from starving children. I'm redistributing wealth from people who won't even miss it. You're stealing from elderly people, I said flatly. People like me, people who worked their whole lives for what they have. People who would have lost it anyway to nursing homes and medical bills and ungrateful children. Victoria's eyes flicked to Kyle. No offense. Kyle flinched but said nothing. And your son? I pressed. Daniel built his entire career fighting people like you. Does he know what his mother really does? Something shifted in Victoria's face. The first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. Pain. Daniel believes I retired comfortably. He believes I spend my time volunteering and traveling. Her voice dropped. He believes his mother is a good person. But she's not. No. Victoria met my eyes squarely. She's not. And that's the one thing I actually feel guilty about. Not what I've done, but the fact that Daniel would be destroyed if he ever found out. He dedicated his life to putting people like me in prison because he thought he was honoring his father's memory. He has no idea he's been betraying it. The room fell silent except for the crackle of the fire. I looked at this woman, this con artist, this thief, this liar, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Understanding. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, but understanding. I knew what it was like to lose everything, to feel the world had turned against you, to lie awake at night wondering how you'd survive. The difference was, when I'd faced that darkness after Tom died, I'd chosen to rebuild, to find meaning in family and connection and hope. Victoria had chosen to burn it all down. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. Victoria looked up at me with something like resignation. You're going to call Daniel, right now, in front of us, and you're going to tell him exactly what you've been doing. Renee, I'm not finished. I held up my hand. After that, you're going to return every penny Kyle and Jessica spent on that BMW. You're going to provide my attorney with documentation of every other victim you've scammed over the years. And you're going to cooperate fully with whatever investigation follows. Victoria stared at me. And if I do all that? Then maybe I'll recommend that the prosecutor show some leniency when you're sentenced. That's not much of a deal. It's more than you deserve. I walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn she'd paid for with stolen money. You made a mistake, Victoria. A fundamental error in judgment. What's that? You looked at me and saw a helpless old woman, someone who could be easily manipulated and discarded, someone who would smile and accept whatever scraps she was given. I turned back to face her. You didn't see the woman who spent 40 years in emergency rooms, making life-and-death decisions under pressure. You didn't see the woman who raised a child on her own while working double shifts. You didn't see the woman who buried her husband and rebuilt her life from ashes. I picked up my phone. You saw weakness, but what you should have seen was 40 years of learning exactly how to handle people who underestimate me. Victoria called Daniel that night. I wasn't there for the conversation, but Kyle told me later that he could hear the shouting through the phone from across the room. Daniel flew in from Seattle 2 days later, not to defend his mother, but to help build the case against her. Watching him at the preliminary hearing was one of the most heartbreaking things I'd ever witnessed. A son sitting across the courtroom from his mother, his face a mask of controlled devastation as prosecutors outlined the scope of her crimes. Victoria had been running her cons for over a decade. Dozens of victims across 6 states, totaling nearly $3 million in stolen assets. She'd been careful, methodical, professional, but she'd also kept records. Detailed records that Daniel himself helped the authorities decipher. In the end, Victoria Shaw pleaded guilty to elder fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft, and money laundering. She was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Daniel testified at the sentencing hearing. He spoke about the father who had raised him to believe in justice, the mother he thought he knew, and the devastating realization that she had become everything he'd dedicated his life to fighting. "I've spent my career helping victims of elder fraud," he said, his voice breaking. "I never imagined my own mother would create more of them." Victoria wept through his entire testimony. Real tears this time. I was sure of it. 6 months later, spring had come to Virginia. I was sitting on my front porch with a glass of lemonade when Kyle's car pulled into the driveway. Every Sunday now, without fail, he and Jessica brought the kids over for dinner. Not because they needed something, not because I was useful to them, but because they wanted to be here. Emma, 8 years old and fearless, sprinted across the lawn and launched herself into my arms. "Grandma Renee, I made you something at school." She thrust a piece of construction paper at me, a crayon drawing of our family. Kyle, Jessica, Emma, Jake, and right in the center, a figure with gray hair and a big smile labeled Grandma in wobbly letters. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." I hugged her tight. "I'm going to put it right on the refrigerator." Jake, 12 now and trying very hard to be too cool for hugs, hung back with his hands in his pockets. But when I held out my arm, he shuffled over and let me squeeze him anyway. "Hey, Grandma." "Hey yourself. How's the baseball team?" "Good. Coach says I might make starting pitcher next season." "That's wonderful, honey. Your grandfather would be so proud." Kyle and Jessica came up the porch steps more slowly, carrying containers of food. We'd started a new tradition. They cooked now, and I supervised. It was better this way, healthier, for all of us. "Mom," Kyle bent to kiss my cheek. "You look good." "I feel good." I smiled at him. "The roses are blooming early this year. Your father would have loved it." We ate dinner together on the back patio, watching the kids chase fireflies in the fading light. Conversation flowed easily now, about school and work and weekend plans, about normal things that normal families discuss. It hadn't always been this easy. Those first few months after Victoria's arrest had been brutal. Kyle and Jessica had to face the consequences of their choices, the second mortgage, the financial ruin, the shame of having been so thoroughly manipulated. But they'd done the work. Kyle found a new job, a better one. Jessica started her own design consulting business. They sold the BMW and used the money to start digging out of debt. And slowly, painfully, we'd rebuilt our family from the wreckage Victoria Shaw had tried to create. After dinner, as Jessica helped the kids with their homework inside, Kyle lingered on the porch with me. "Mom, I need to give you something." He pulled a small wrapped box from his pocket. Not expensive wrapping, just simple brown paper tied with string. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. Tom and me on our wedding day, young and hopeful and impossibly in love. We were standing in front of the church, laughing at something someone had said, completely unaware of the camera. "Where did you find this?" My voice was barely a whisper. "In Dad's workshop. I was cleaning it out last month and I found this old envelope." Kyle's voice was thick. "I think he was planning to have it restored as a surprise for you, before he got sick." I traced my finger over Tom's face, remembering that day, remembering all the days that came after, the good ones and the hard ones, the arguments and the reconciliations, the ordinary moments that had somehow added up to an extraordinary life. "There's something else." Kyle handed me an envelope. "I've been working on this for a while. I wasn't sure how to say it, so I wrote it down. Inside was a letter. 3 pages, handwritten, in Kyle's cramped script. "Dear Mom, I've started this letter 100 times and thrown it away 100 more. How do you apologize for something like what I did? How do you make up for treating your own mother like she was worth $3? The truth is, you can't. There's no gift, no words, no gesture that can undo the hurt I caused. All I can do is try to explain, and try to be better. I was scared, Mom. terrified. Everything was falling apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. When Victoria came along with her promises and her solutions, I wanted so badly to believe that someone else could make it all okay. I wanted a miracle, but that's no excuse, because the real miracle was sitting right in front of me the whole time. You, a mother who sacrificed everything for her family, a mother who would have moved heaven and earth to help me if I'd just asked. I was too proud to ask, too ashamed, and I almost lost you because of it. Mom, you taught me that family means putting each other first, even when it's hard. I forgot that lesson for a while, but I promise you, I will never forget it again. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for fighting for us, even when we didn't deserve it. Thank you for being the kind of mother who sees weakness and answers with strength. I love you. I always have, even when I was too stupid and scared to show it. Your son, Kyle. I couldn't see the words anymore through my tears. Kyle knelt beside my chair and wrapped his arms around me, and for a long moment, we just held each other. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, sweetheart. I kissed the top of his head, like I used to when he was small. I know. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in Tom's recliner with my phone. A text notification lit up the screen. Daniel Shaw. How was the family visit? I smiled. Daniel and I had become unlikely friends over the past 6 months. Two people bonded by the strange experience of loving someone who'd made terrible choices. He called every few weeks to check in, and I'd started visiting Victoria in prison once a month at his request. She needs to know someone still sees her as human, he'd told me. Even after everything. Especially after everything. It was perfect, I typed back. How are you holding up? Good days and bad days. But more good ones lately. Thank you for not giving up on her completely. The letters you've been sending her, they mean more than you know. I looked at the framed photo on my mantelpiece. Me and Tom on our wedding day, now restored and beautiful. Beside it sat the $3 piggy bank, a reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything. And next to that, a small newspaper clipping from Victoria's sentencing. Not because I wanted to gloat, but because I never wanted to forget. Victoria Shaw had tried to steal my money, my house, and my family. She'd exploited my son's desperation and manipulated my trust. But she hadn't stolen my capacity for hope, for forgiveness, for love. I turned off the lamp and sat in the darkness, listening to the old house settle around me. The floors Tom had refinished, the walls we'd painted together, the life we'd built, room by room, year by year. Victoria had been right about one thing. The world could be cruel. It could take everything from you in an instant. It could turn the people you trusted into strangers, the life you'd built into ashes. But she'd been wrong about how to respond. When the world tried to make me a victim, I'd chosen to fight back. And when the fight was over, I'd chosen to forgive. Not because Victoria deserved it, but because carrying hatred was a poison I refused to drink. I stood up slowly, my joints creaking in that familiar way they did now, and walked to the window. Outside, the moon was full over Virginia, casting silver light across the garden Tom and I had planted 30 years ago. The roses were blooming, just like I'd told Kyle, red and pink and white, climbing up the trellis Tom had built with his own hands. Life was fragile. It could break you if you let it. But it could also heal you if you were brave enough to let it try. The next morning, I woke up early and made myself a cup of coffee. I sat on my porch and watched the sunrise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Birds were singing. The air smelled like spring. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Love you, Grandma. See you next Sunday. And one from Jake. Thanks for the cookies. Don't tell Mom I ate 5. And one from Kyle. Breakfast Tuesday? My treat. I found a place that makes those blueberry pancakes you love. And one from Jessica. Thank you for everything, Renee. We don't deserve you. I smiled, setting down my phone. Victoria Shaw had looked at my life and seen weakness. An old woman alone, vulnerable, ripe for exploitation. But what she'd really seen was a story she didn't understand. A woman who'd survived loss and heartbreak and betrayal. A woman who'd learned that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up, every time. A woman who knew that the measure of a family isn't how they treat you when things are easy. It's how they find their way back to love when things are hard. I picked up my coffee and toasted the empty chair beside me, where Tom used to sit every morning for 30 years. "We did okay, didn't we?" I said softly. "Raised a good kid in the end. He just needed a little reminder." The breeze rustled through the rose garden, and for just a moment I could have sworn I heard Tom laughing. I finished my coffee, put on my gardening gloves, and walked out into the morning sun. There was work to do, roses to tend, a life to keep living. And somewhere in federal prison, a woman who'd tried to take it all was learning, slowly, what it truly cost to choose hate over love. Some people, when the world hurts them, choose to hurt it back. They become the wolves they once feared, telling themselves it's survival, telling themselves it's strength. But real strength isn't about what you take. It's about what you give, what you forgive, what you choose to believe in, even when belief seems foolish. Victoria Shaw taught me that lesson, though not in the way she intended. She showed me exactly what I never wanted to become, and in doing so, she reminded me of everything I wanted to be: a mother, a grandmother, a survivor, a woman worth far more than $3, not because of what I own, but because of who I love and who loves me back. And that, I think, is the only wealth that truly matters in the end.